All right. During the reading process, I do not permit any moving around of any kind, so you have to get really comfortable. You're welcome to sit on the floor, sit in the comfy chairs, sit wherever you want, where you can be completely comfortable. Because once I start, if you talk, you're out of here. If you unzip your purse, you're out of here. If you unzip your backpack, you're out of here. If you make any noises other than an uncontrollable cough or sneeze that just pops up, then you're out of here. Okay? So, yeah, I got this. We're good. Okay, so I'm going to begin, and you must be comfortable, so go. Do what you need to do, but be comfortable. Sit wherever you want. I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to record it. I'm recording a video. Later. Hey, I'm recording a video. Do you want me to pause it while you goof around? Hurry up. Get comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to stay there.
Just put it down. We're rolling, people. Take one.
Camera action. Roll it.
Girls, if you can't keep quiet, you can't be in here. Martin, I'm ready to start. Okay, as I read, I'll be stopping from time to time to go over some of the language that's used because the writer is very, very interesting. He uses a lot of metaphor and simile, and some of them don't come across unless you stop and think about them. So great readers always stop and think about things, and then sometimes they actually reread so they can figure out what it actually meant. And sometimes they ask other people what it means because they don't even know. So to be a great reader doesn't mean to just understand everything the first time you read it. It requires a lifetime of working at it and studying, going back over, and trying to get what they're talking about. That's the way to get the best experience out of reading. So this is a sophisticated, modern, alive Native American writer. He's still alive. And the name of the story, Jesus Christ's Half-Brother is Alive and Well on the Spokane Indian Reservation, by Sherman Alexie. 1966. Rosemary Mourning Dove gave birth to a boy today, and seeing as how it was nearly Christmas and she kept telling everyone she was still a virgin, even though Frank Many Horses says it was his, we all just figured it was an accident. Anyhow, she gave birth to him, but he came out all blue, and they couldn't get him to breathe for a long time, but he finally did, and Rosemary Mourning Dove named him blank, which is unpronounceable in Indian and in English, but it means he who crawls silently through the grass with a small bow and one bad arrow, hunting for enough deer to feed the whole tribe. We just call him James. 1967, Frank Many Horses and Lester Falls Apart and I were drinking beers in the breakaway bar, playing pool and talking stories when we heard the sirens. Indians get all excited when we hear sirens because it means fires, and it means they need firefighters to put out the fires. And it means we get to be firefighters, and it means we get to be paid to be firefighters. Hell, somebody always starts a fire down at the Indian Burial Grounds. And it was about time for the 13th annual All-Indian Burial Grounds fire. So Frank and Lester and I ran down to the fire station expecting to get hired. But we see smoke coming from Commodity Village, where all the really poor Indians live. So we run down there instead, and it was Rosemary Mourning Dove's house that was on fire. Okay, stop for a second. How poor do you have to be to want to start a fire so you can get hired to be the fire person to put it out? Yeah, you're out of work for a while, right? What is a commodity? Anybody know? Has something to do with communion, but it's different. Anybody know what a commodity is? Okay. Have any of you been down to Emma Presh Park? Have you ever seen Emma Presh Park? In King and Story? Have you ever driven by when they have a sign out there that says that on a certain day they're going to be giving away cheese and other things to the public? Okay, that's where they give out what they call commodities. Commodities are often government subsidized. They're foods that are left over from the agricultural industry. They're surplus. And they gather them up and take them to places where they can distribute them to people who need food. So the commodity village is like a way of saying the place where the poorest Indians have to get public assistance and have to get government cheese and government food supplies. Indians got buckets of water, but this fire was way too big, and we could hear a baby crying. And Frank Many Horses gets all excited even though it's Lillian Many's baby right next to us. But Frank knows James is in the house, so he goes running in before any of us can stop him, and pretty soon I see Frank leaning out the upstairs window holding James, and they're both a little on fire. And Frank throws James out the window, and I'm running my ass to catch him before he hits the ground, making like a high school football hero again. But I miss him, just barely slipping through my fingers. And James hits the ground hard, and I pick him up right away and slap the flames out with my hands, all the while expecting James to be dead. But he's just looking at me almost normal, except the top of his head looks all dented in like a beer can. He wasn't crying. Is that a good sign if a baby falls on their head and they're not crying? Probably not good. 1967. I went down to the reservation hospital to see how James and Frank and Rosemary were doing, and I got drunk just before I went so I wouldn't be scared of all the white walls and the sound of arms and legs getting sawed off down in the basement. Is this real, or is he just kind of...
Maybe it's real.
Could be, but he's probably just exaggerating about the arms and legs getting sawed off down in the basement. But I hear the screams anyway, and they were Indian screams, and those can travel forever, like all around the world, and sometimes from 100 years ago, so I close my ears and hide my eyes and just look down at the clean floors. Why is it in the Indian scream in 1967... If it sounds like it came from 100 years ago, what year would that be? 1867. What was going on in 1867? Anybody know? What was that? The Trail of Tears. In Native Americans, it was just after the Civil War, they reused the cavalry, only this time they used them to push Indians away and force them on forced marches where many died and many froze to death. So he's talking about how Indian screams seem to be coming from 100 years ago, because there's still a memory of this event that's haunting modern Native Americans. Oh, Jesus, I'm so drunk I want to pray, but I don't. And before I can change my mind about coming here, Moses Mourning Dove pulls me aside to tell me Frank and Rosemary have died. And since I saved James's life, I should be the one who raises him. Moses says it's Indian tradition. But somehow, since Moses is going on about 200 years old and still drinking and screwing like he was 20, I figure he's just trying to get out of his grandfatherly duties. I don't really want any of it, and I'm sick, and the hospital is making me sicker. And my heart is shaking and confused, like when the nurse wakes you up in the middle of the night to give you a sleeping pill. But I know James will end up some Indian kid at a welfare house making baskets and wearing itchy clothes. And I'm only 20 myself. But I take one look at James, all lumpy and potato looking, and I look in the mirror and see myself holding him, and I take him home. Tonight the mirror will forgive my face. Why will the mirror forgive his face?
He's ugly.
What?
He's ugly.
Why will the mirror forgive his face tonight?
The mirror is this one. The reflection of himself.
Tonight the mirror will forgive his face suggests that another night maybe the mirror didn't forgive his face. What clue do we have into his personality where maybe he's come home some night and not the mirror didn't forgive him? He's a drunk. Yeah. So why will the mirror forgive him tonight then?
He's not drunk.
He has the baby. Also.
He has the baby. And what is his intention with the baby? To raise him. So for once in his sorry drunk life, he's done something that he can be not ashamed of, at least, right? In 1967, all dark tonight, and James couldn't sleep and just kept looking at the ceiling. So I walk on down to the football field carrying James so we can both watch the stars looking down at the reservation. Hold on. I put James down on the 50-yard line, and I run and run across the frozen grass, wishing there was snow enough to make a trail and let the world know I was there in the morning. I think that's what taggers do sometimes. They tag to let the world know they exist. Thinking I could spell out my name, or James's name, or every name I could think of until I stepped on every piece of snow on the field like it was every piece of the world, or at least every piece of this reservation that has so many pieces, it might just be the world. I want to walk circles around James, getting closer and closer to him in a new dance, and a better kind of healing, which could make James talk and walk before he learns to cry. But he's not crying, and he's not walking, and he's not talking. And I see him sometimes like an old man passed out in the back of a reservation van with shit in his pants and a battered watch in his pocket that always shows the same damn time. Why is this a good simile for James's life right now? Nothing is changing. So I picked James up from the cold and the grass that waits for spring and the sun to change its world, but I can only walk home through the cold with another future on my back. And James's future tucked in my pocket like an empty wallet, or a newspaper that feeds the fire and never gets read. Sometimes all of this is home. So again, a simile for James's future is a what? Is comparing his future to a what? An empty wallet. Can that be good? A good future with promise? How about a newspaper that feeds the fire but never gets read? What's the purpose of a newspaper? To be read. And I think when I think about it, I love this image more every time I read it, because we as people, 85% of us on the planet apparently, are all looking to be in a bonded pair. That's how we want to live. We want someone to be there with us. Whether it's of the opposite gender or the same gender or whatever, we all want to have a bonded pair. And, well, almost all of us. And so what we often want from that future honey bunny is to have them be able to know us. So they're a witness to our lives. And so they know who we are. It's as though they can read us like a newspaper. And we want that person to be able to read everything about us. Except maybe, we keep a few ads on page 59 that we don't want them to read, right? Everybody has some secrets. But for the most part, we want that one significant other to read everything about us. And here James, he's suggesting his future consists of a newspaper that will burn and never be read. Such a sad image, but at the same time such a powerful one. 1968, the world changing the world, changing the world. I don't watch the TV anymore since it exploded and left a hole in the wall. The woodpile don't dream of me no more. I could really laugh on this one because we used to have to chop wood. And if the wood is thinking he's coming out there, he's not coming out there anymore. It sits there by the axe, and they talk about the cold that waits in corners and surprises you on a warm, almost spring day. Today I stood at the window for hours, and then I took the basketball from inside the wood stove. Okay, how long has it been since you've used your wood stove? If you can keep your basketball in it. It's been a while. It would melt, right? And shot baskets at the hoop nailed to a pine tree in the yard. I shot and shot until the cold meant I was protected because my skin was too warm to feel any of it. I was wondering if any of you have played basketball this long in the cold to where you start numbing up. Have you?
Rain.
Really?
Not sick.
I shot and shot until my fingertips bled and my feet ached and my hair stuck to the skin of my bare back. James waited by the porch with his hands in the dirt and his feet stuck into the leather shoes I found in the dump under a washing machine. I can't believe the details I'm forced to remember with each day that James comes closer to talking. I change his clothes and his dirty pants, and I wash his face and the crevices of his little body until he shines like a new check. This is my religion. So how serious has he become as a father? Very serious. And what is this shining like a new check? Can a check shine?
No, it's not money.
No, but why is it a good image anyway? because it represents money, which is in the United States of America, our money is supposed to represent gold reserves. So it's an interesting image, especially since it's contrasted with an empty wallet, because now he's not an empty wallet, he's a shiny check, in fact. 1968. Seems like the cold would never go away and winter would be like the bottom of my feet, but then it is gone in one night, and in its place comes the sun so large and laughable. James sitting up in his chair so young, and he won't talk, and the doctors at the Indian clinic say it's way too early for him to be talking anyhow. But I see in his eyes something, and I see in his eyes a voice, and I see in his eyes a whole new set of words. It ain't Indian or English, and it ain't cash register, and it ain't traffic light or speed bump, and it ain't window or door. Late one day, James and I watched the sun fly across the sky like a basketball on fire, until it falls down completely and lands in Benjamin Lake with a splash and shakes the ground, and even wakes up Lester Falls Apart, who thought it was his father come back to slap his face again. Summer coming like a car from down the highway. Isn't there an NBA team with that as its logo? The basketball on fire flying through the
The Heat.
Miami Heat, right? Is it Miami Heat? Yeah. 1968. James must know how to cry because he hasn't cried yet. And I know he's waiting for that one moment to cry like it was 500 years of tears. Again, this mention of the 500 years, what would that represent? From almost 2000 backwards 500 years is the date that we just talked about yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah.
The early 15th century? Or the 15th century, yeah. So that's how long there have been tears for Native Americans. He ain't walked anywhere, and there are no blisters on his soles, but there are dreams worn clean into his rib cage, and it shakes and shakes with each breath. And I see he's trying to talk when he grabs at the air behind his head, or stares up at the sky so hard. All of this temperature rising hot, and I set James down in the shade by the basketball court, and I play until the sweat of my body makes it rain everywhere on the reservation. I play until the music of my shoes against pavement sounds like every drum. Then I'm home alone and I watch the cockroaches live their complicated lives. I hold James with one arm and my basketball with the other arm, and I hold everything else inside my whole body. So he's holding a lot in, I think, is the implication. You know, when we say, oh, you hold too much in, what does that mean? Does that mean that you ate a lot of cookies for breakfast and you're not able to pass them on, or does it mean? What does it mean?
Your feelings.
Yeah, you're holding your feelings in. He doesn't have anybody to talk to, does he? I take James, 1969, how old is James now? 3, he's almost 3, right? Or he's already 3. I take James to the Indian clinic because he ain't crying yet. And because all he does sometimes is stare, and sometimes he'll wrap his arms around the stray dogs and let them carry him around the yard. He's strong enough to hold his body off the ground, but he ain't strong enough to lift his tongue from the bottom of his mouth to use the words for love or anger or hunger or good morning. Maybe he's only a few years old, but he's got eyes that are ancient and old, and dark like a castle or a lake where the turtles go to die, and sometimes even to live. This image of the turtles, where did you just read about that? The earth on the turtle's back, right? This is a common metaphor in Native American literature. Maybe he's going to howl out words when I least expect it or want it, and he'll yell out a cuss word in church or a prayer in the middle of the grocery store. Now, those are two inappropriate places, right? You don't cuss in church and you don't pray in the grocery store. But I have to share this story with you. I have to take a break from this story for just a second to tell you one of my stories about little kids and their language development. There was a 3-year-old daughter of some friends of my parents who she had not spoken ever in her life. She just didn't talk, and her parents were kind of getting worried about it because she still hadn't said anything. She seemed normal, but they didn't know what was going on with her. And then she was at the preschool one time. How many of you had, like at your kindergarten or whatever, you had like a little pretend sink and refrigerator and like a little, okay, so you could go over and play, right? So she's there playing on the little stove with her little pan, and some guests came over to the, preschool to visit, and the teacher was kind of explaining, well, we're getting concerned about this little girl because she hasn't spoken yet. And she said, I'm going to call her over. So she said, honey, come on over. And the little girl turns around and says, I can't, these goddamn peaches will burn. First words out of her mouth ever. So her parents were completely shocked, right? But when you think about it, it's even more funny because where did she get that? You know that's her mother, right? So pretty embarrassing. But this can happen. Some children just completely formulate language in their brains, and they just don't say anything until they're completely ready, with sentences all ready to go. And then boom, when you least expect it. And he's suggesting that this could happen. Today I moved through town and walked past the people who hadn't seen me in so long, maybe for months, and they asked questions about me and James, and no one bothered to knock on the door and look for the answers. It's just me and James, walking and walking, except he's on my back, and his eyes are looking past the people who are looking past us, for the coyote of our soul, and the wolverine of our heart, and the crazy, crazy man that touches every Indian who spends too much time alone. He's talking about loneliness can be a big, ugly dog, you know. You spend too much time in loneliness and you get a little crazy. I think many of us have been there. I stand in the trading post touching the canned goods and hoping for a vision of all the miles until Seymour comes in with a $20 bill and buys a couple of cases of beer, and we drink and drink all night long. James gets handed from woman to woman and from man to man, and a few children hold this child of mine who doesn't cry or recognize the human being in his own body. All the drunks happy to see me drunk again, and back from the wagon, and I fell off that wagon and broke my ass, and dreams. And I wake up the next morning in a field watching a cow watch me. Okay, that's pretty drunk when you wake up in a field, not knowing how you got there, and the cow is staring at you. With piss in my pants, I make the long walk home past the HUD houses. That's Housing and Urban Development. The government program for houses for poor. And abandoned cars, and past the powwow grounds and the Assembly of God where the sinless sing like they could forgive us all. I get home and James is there with Susie song feeding him and rocking him like a boat or a three-legged chair. I say no, and I take James away and put him in his crib, and I move into Susie's arms and let her rock me away from my stomach and thin skin. Okay, do you think things might change now that there's a woman in the picture? Could be, right? It's kind of hard to raise this baby. He's lonely, and all he has is James, and James won't talk. 1969, long days and nights mean the sky looks the same all the time, and James has no words yet, but he dreams and kicks in his sleep, and sometimes kicks his body against my body as he sleeps in my arms. Nobody dreams all the time, because it would hurt too much. But James keeps dreaming and sleeping through a summer rainstorm, and heat lightning reaching down a hand, and then a fist to tear a tree in half, and then to tear my eyes in half with the light. We had venison for dinner. We ate deer. Venison is deer meat. Anybody had it? Yeah? We ate deer, and its wild taste shook me up and down my spine. James spit his mouthful out on the floor. And the dogs came to finish it up, and I ate and ate, and the dogs ate and ate what they could find, and the deer grew in my stomach. The deer grew horns and hooves and skin and eyes that pushed at my rib cage. Have you ever eaten so much that you feel like, oh, it doesn't even feel good anymore? It's like, oh, ow. Yeah. And I ate and ate until I could not feel anything but my stomach expanding and stretched full. All my life, the days I remember most with every detail, sharp and clear, are the days when my stomach was full. How many days has he gone without a full stomach? Probably a lot, because to remember only clearly, You actually cause brain damage if you don't eat for long periods of time. If you go hungry too long, or the food that you're eating has no nutrients. I remember hearing about some teachers that went to Nicaragua, and they found that by the time the children were 15 in the classrooms, about 2/3 of them were already brain damaged from the diet that they were forced to live on by American companies who would make them work the fields for dole pineapple and stuff like that. And all they were given to eat was like manioc, which is a very starchy food that has very little high quality protein or nutrients. So they're sitting in classrooms as sophomores supposedly, but they're like brain damaged. 1969, we played our first basketball game of the season tonight in the community center, and I had Susie's song Watch James while I played, and all of us warriors roaring against the air and the nets and the clock that didn't work, and our memories and our dreams and the 20th century horses we called our legs. We played some Nez Perce team, and they ran like they were still running from the cavalry. That's the tribe that was on the Veil of the what do you call it? The March of Tears? The Trail of Tears? That's one of the tribes, isn't it? I'm pretty sure. They were kicking the shit out of us again when I suddenly steal the ball from their half-white point guard and drive all the way to the bucket. I jump in the air planning to dunk it when the half-white point guard runs under me, knocking my ass to the floor. And when I land, I hear a crunch and my leg bends in half the wrong way. They take me to the reservation hospital, and later on they tell me my leg has exploded and I can't play ball for a long time, or maybe forever. And when Susie comes by with James and they ask me if this is my wife and son, I tell them yes. And James still doesn't make a noise, and so they ask me how old he is. I tell him he's almost 4 years old, and they say his physical development is slow, but that's normal for an Indian child. Anyhow, I have to have an operation and all, but since I don't have the money or the strength or the memory, and it's not covered by Indian Health, I just get up and walk home almost crying because my leg and life hurt so bad. Susie stays with me that night, and in the dark she touches my knee and asks me how much it hurts, and I tell her it hurts more than I can talk about, so she kisses all my scars, and she huddles up close to me and she's warm, and she talks into my ear close. She isn't always asking questions, and sometimes she has the answers. In the morning I wake up before her, and I hobble into the kitchen and make some coffee and fix a couple of bowls of cornflakes, and we sit in bed eating together, while James lies still in his crib watching the ceiling, so Susie and I watch the ceiling too. The ordinary can be like medicine. Have you guys ever had that kind of a day that's so bad that just getting home and getting your little jammies and getting your little cereal and going to bed is just so good? Like, thank you for this little joy in life that I have, because my day was so bad. Yeah. So sometimes the ordinary is like medicine. I like that. Okay, press to stop recording.